So I could have been 6 or 7 years old when I had my first visitor. My name is Mumtaz Suliman. I am the author of a book that has recently been published called I'm Not a F***ing Mop. Now my book takes you through 5 generations of a cycle of pain that highlights sexual abuse, domestic abuse, GBV, and racial discrimination, because I have a very rich African heritage. My great-grandmother is African. So if I'm sitting here today, it's not because I want to wave at Mom and say, "Hi Mom, I made it on TV." It's very difficult for me to sit here and tell you about this little girl who was 6 years old. Let's go back to me when I was 6 years old. This was in the 70s. It was a time when apartheid was at its coldest, cruelest, most wicked time. So the Calabar system didn't allow us to attend schools that were with Mom and Dad. So I had to attend school which was 100 kilometers away from home. Having no mom to take me to school on that first day, no hand to hold. I mean, take a moment and just consider your own child that's 6 or 7 years old. They're fragile. You want to give them every bit of anchoring and support and love and make sure that they're just happy all the time. I didn't have that. I didn't have a mother to take me to school. So I could have been 6 or 7 years old when I had my first visitor. All I knew was these are private parts. They're used for passing urine, for peeing. And my first visitor had made himself comfortable and violated that part of my private part when he would come, put his one hand over my mouth and the other hand on my private parts, stroking and whisper and say, "This is just a game. I wasn't supposed to tell anyone." I don't know, I just know I had a lot of fear. And so you stay stuck in fear. You don't want to share it with anybody else because you're afraid of what they'll think of you. You slip into so many different emotions, not just fear. It's the guilt, it's the shame, it's what are people going to think, because now you're feeling dirty and you're feeling not good enough and you're feeling like this body is not my body. And you don't want to be judged by anybody, because you know what? That's the first thing that happens in communities. People judge you. So this had resulted in many years of sleep paralysis. Now you do know that sleep paralysis constricts the air passages and you break out with a sweat, with lots of fear and anxiety. So when I'd experienced this, my folks had taken me to clerics upon clerics. You do know traditionally we go to sangomas and we go to clerics and we want to blame the demons and the evil eye and everything else. So I'd been to psychologists who said it was stress and the clerics said it was demons. And then hopping along memory lane, I take you to my between 10 and 13, I'm again not too sure. I have another visitor. Whether I had visitors between 6 and this age, I couldn't be too sure because I've blocked such a big part of my life out. This visitor was hiding behind the walls of a school, a religious school, which we call madrasa. So this religious school had this teacher who wasn't just an ordinary teacher, he was the principal. Now I think back and I ask, how could the community have trusted us innocent young girls and boys with a principal who was this dirty and this old? He'd selected me to be the lead singer in the upcoming concert, and he asked me to go after hours so we could practice on my vocals. And so I still remember those cold brown wooden school chairs we used to have. I think it was those. In the back of the classroom with 2 of them. I was on the right-hand side and he was on the left-hand side. And then I have a covering on, a burqa. And his hands would go inside and through my clothes, and he would be fondling the breasts. And he would whisper in my ears, "What the eyes admire, the heart desires." And this went on for weeks. Days and weeks were going, and it could have been a couple of days before the concert. I couldn't handle it and I bailed out. And everybody judged me again. How could I do this? It was the 11th hour, and so I was up front and said, "Look, this was happening to me. This is exactly what's been going on." They didn't believe me. They thought I'm lying, and he came from a glass house, and they didn't want me to talk about it because they said I was going to break a family unit. I didn't have a mother to chat to, although when I did see her, due to the apartheid, I was 100 kilometers away, so I'd only see Mum twice a year. And when I did see her, I'd share the stories with her, and she would say, "It's okay, nobody believes you, but I do, and someday he will self-expose." Now I look back at these people on their plinths and I ask them, did any of you think about breaking my life? I began my healing journey way in my 30s, late in my 30s, which means it took me 10 years to get to where I am, to shift to love and forgiveness and compassion. But they took away the best part of my years. They snatched the best part of my life. I couldn't own this body. So 6-year-old had taken that away, and 10 to 13-year-old had taken this away. The illnesses I had manifested, my womb that I had lost at a very early age, because I had profuse bleeding. I was hemorrhaging with a period cycle. I had to have an emergency hysterectomy. My private parts were gone. My lady bits were gone. I was 19, he was 21. We were so much in love. So I was 16 years old when I first began courting my husband. We were in the same school, and we were so much in love. We courted for 4 years before getting married. I got married at 19. I was 19, he was 21. Life gets in the way. We tend to adopt these roles of a mundane relationship or partnership. So you just go on cooking and cleaning. And I was a teacher way back then, earning peanuts, coming home with very little, so you treat it like a monkey. He worked very hard as well. And I think the pressures in a community that's stuck with belief systems can sometimes take over your rational side of thinking. So that's what happened to him. He'd had a lot of pressures coming from lots of sides. Some were known to me, some were unknown to me. I couldn't quite tell. So we were this young couple trying to make life, the pressures of finances, little children to nurture, and basically taking care of a home. I mean, we don't put this thought when we rush to get married at such an early age. We don't realize that there's so much more responsibility than just courting days. I'm not sure what men go through, but they possibly have a lot of frustration as well, because they have an ego to serve. And they need to be the man. So at some point, they probably feel that they're failing their partners or their families. And perhaps that's what grows this egocentric, power-driven, abusive person. And I guess that's what happened to me. I don't know what it is about brides and their in-laws. We always have this tug of war, this fighting match. I mean, it seems silly now, but way back then, that's what life was. Okay, I remember there was a Saturday We were invited for dinner at his mom's place. You're going to your in-laws' place and you're feeling so much of pressure. You don't want to be there and you feel as though you're forced to be there. Mother-in-law passes a comment, you pass another comment. This irritates the husband. So he might have been irritated with something I'd said. So I remember the dinner, we'd gone through the dinner and he seemed very irritated. Couldn't wait to get back in the car to leave. And the moment we got into the car, screaming match started. Why did you have to say this? When my mom said that, why did you have to say this? And I retaliated. And he said some words and I said some words, and I was sitting on the passenger seat, so he took my head and he banged it onto the dashboard and then abruptly stopped the car wherever we were. And he told me to get out of the car. I couldn't just, it was late at night, it was a Saturday night, I couldn't just get out. As he's opening through me, he's trying to open the door and push me out, and I'm pulling it back in. And so this battle continued, and somehow he settled down and we drove back home. For me, everybody's situation is different. I couldn't say it was always his fault or it was always my fault. It didn't have to get to the beating stage. So we stay on longer hoping that things will get better because we have nowhere else to go, because we are afraid of what the people will say. Every person has a story. Every person has a skeleton in their closet. So we worry so much, and this anxiety of what the neighbors are going to say, and the gossip is one of the main things that keep you bound and gagged in a prison. And that's why you don't let go. You also stay stuck because where will I go? You're so searching for validation and you feel so not good enough and you hate yourself and you feel no one will ever want me again, until eventually you break free and you really don't care what the people will say, because the people are not bringing 20K a month on your table and saying, yeah, nourish yourself, put food on your table. I was getting ready to go out with two of my best friends. We did this every now and then, got dressed in my very pretty clothes. We were all excited and chatting about where we're going next, what we're doing, and then the man walks in. God knows what might have pissed him off, but he dragged me by my hair. One thing led to another. He dragged me by my beautiful long hair, beating and shouting and screaming out of my bedroom, through the tiled passage, into the lounge, wrecking everything in front of my two best friends, the domestic worker, my children. My kids had seen their mum being bullied, and so each child was affected differently. My son was an introvert, he would keep things in. My girls were far more vocal. And so the next day I woke up and I took my kids to the park. I didn't allow them to go to school, and I did a lot of thinking, and I said, enough. I need to take my power back, and I need to find who I am, because I've been walking around with too many masks, and who was I really? And I think God heard my prayers, because sometime in that week I'd met a very good old friend who looked at me and just said, had one look at me, because you must know that over the years with previous trauma which I'd buried and then current trauma, I packed on layers and layers. We tend to comfort eat. And I'd met this friend and he just gave me one look and said, what happened to you? I told him a little bit, not too much, because we always tend to mask what we're really going through. You know, we become so good at masking all these things, so wonderful world of makeup art, and you hide all the bruises. But he knew enough to realize that I needed healing. And so we'd gone through many years, 15 years, I like to think it was 15 years of being the bullied wife and him being the bully. There was always a slap here, a blue mark here. So I think that's where the title of my book came from, I'm Not a F***ing Mop. Because I'd given my power away and I allowed him to keep beating me every opportunity he could get. Perhaps this is the message they need to take to the men. Take ownership. Fix your stuff up and change. There are some people that won't change because they have complete blocks inside and they won't admit that I've messed up and I need help and I'm willing to change, and that's just the ego speaking. Men shouldn't feel shy or ashamed and say, I can't do this here, it makes me weak. Guess what? It makes you stronger if you can say, I'm sorry. So after the writing, and when I finished that book, I went through that scene and I cried like a baby. So the turning point for me was the day I rose and said, enough. I was no more this meek little girl that was subservient and yes sir, no sir. There was something liberating about my newfound freedom, that it gave my voice a lot more power, and my voice had more definition and affirmed that this was enough. I'd been shifting, and through this time my husband lived in that house. I'd given him a choice and I said, I'm going on this journey. If you want to join me, we can both grow together. But it's no use that I'll be growing and you here, I'm sailing off. I didn't hold his hand and force him to do the things that I was doing. He watched me and he liked what he saw. He realized that whatever was happening outside me didn't shift who I was. So even if we drive somewhere and something or someone annihilated me, I would just smile, take a deep disconnecting breath and walk away. And that's what he learned. The interesting thing is that he took accountability. It takes a big man to take accountability. It takes a big person to look at you and say, I'm sorry. I did this, I'm not proud of it, I'm willing to change. Please help me. Know your Peter from your Judas. Peter can be restored, he deserves a chance. Judas, like the other perpetrators, has a really bad heart. You need to let him go. That is toxic. Be independent enough to walk away from that which doesn't serve you. There are a lot of people that I do see, like myself, that would share stories and say, I stayed with a man because I felt sorry for him. I have another message. You are not his nurse. You cannot feel sorry for him. He needs to fix himself up. He needs to go for the anger management if it is a problem, and he has acknowledged that he has a problem. But the moment they don't acknowledge and the moment they don't shift to accountability, they're not worthy of you. In my late 30s, when I'd taken the step for healing, when one person shifts in the house, the entire house shifts. So when you practice these tools at home, you will notice a different energy. You will notice consciousness changing. And this is what I'm saying. If you can change in your house one person, and then your community, and then your country, and then the world. My tools to healing was lots of writing. Writing for me has been a cathartic experience, purifying, cleansing. So writing the book had been the easiest part for me. Sharing my story and coming out in public and giving very personal, vivid descriptions of what I had been through early traumatic years wasn't so easy, not for myself, because when you've lost so much and you can come out and talk about things as painful as sexual abuse or domestic violence, I had to consider my family and my loved ones, and I had to consider the circumstances and the repercussions. After much talks and a lot of deliberation, my family had decided that I was coming out with this book, or coming out publicly, not for myself. I was doing it for you, for my children, for your children, for the masses. Even though my 6-year-old surfaced when I was 38, it wasn't only now till 6 months ago that my sleep paralysis had ended. My sleep paralysis was connected to that, because one hand over the mouth and one hand here. That's exactly what happens in sleep paralysis. So after the writing, and when I finished that book, I went through that scene and I cried like a baby. I promise you that was the first night I slept well. It's been 8 months now. Forgiveness is not condoning a person's actions. It doesn't mean what the person did is okay and it's acceptable. Forgiveness is just setting yourself free. And you know, until you don't reach the point of forgiveness, you're always going to have a saboteur. So you're going to sabotage relationships and you're going to sabotage your abundance. So when we shift to forgiveness, you're kind of moving that hurdle so that you can progress with your journey. And you're opening up new channels of abundance to flow freer to you. You know, if you try just looking at someone that you've had an altercation with and say, I forgive you, you'll feel how empowering and freeing that is. And so my passion for shifting consciousness and making every woman realize her worth, and my own pain served me, serving my higher purpose. So I want to give back. And I run these workshops and I do one-on-one healing that I offer to ladies. It's completely non-profit, and I want you to take opportunity of this because it's really intense and it's giving you the opportunity to say, I am willing to change. I love me. I am enough. And that's what I want every woman to reach. You are enough. I'm sitting here telling you, I'm approaching my 50s. I'm doing the best I can. I go to the gym every day. I drink enough water. I see everything and everyone with eyes of love and compassion. So I'm an absolutely forgiving person. I always believe every person's doing the best they can at any given moment. And the fact that when our story changed and taught love, my children have so much of respect for both their mom and dad. So I'd like to say, Ashiki, I'm proud of you. You have walked through this journey further than I have, because it takes a really big man to say, I'm sorry, I'm willing to change.